Let me show you how I used the Korg Wavestation EX to create a retro-inspired Resident Evil 2 boss theme. The primary sound for this theme came from the Korg Wavestation EX. I blended 3 patches from the internal ROM sound bank, the main sound bank in the Wavestation. I blended 3 of those sounds, strings, a voice, and a low percolating synth. And I've blended that with my own real atmosphere and a mechanical type rhythm. Also, my secret weapon, Apple Loops, for the hits, effects, and boomer type swishes and stuff like that. I'm going to show you the session, and then I'm going to demonstrate some of the sounds. So let's check it out. Here's the Wavestation audio. When you enter into the room, you get this huge sound like this. This is a blend of my own made atmosphere from the game Creatures of War. I made this as an industrial, big, atmospheric, real world atmosphere that blends all my music together in the game environment. And that's how I add saturation and glue. And I do tend to EQ that to fit it in, because it can be a little too much. But I've blended that with the ROM 6 Guardians patch on the Wavestation EX. And that's created this industrial type environment right away as Leon's entering into the boss room. I have this riding through the whole track, and that's how I tend to do things with the survival horror music, especially with the non-intrusive stuff, and in this case a more complex piece, where I'll do this canvas approach, where I'll lay down a baseline low-end canvas, and I will just like paint on top of that canvas, and I'll add things on top of that canvas. So that's what I've done with this. So if I take you over here to the Wavestation ROM 6 Guardians, here's what it sounds like in the track. And what I'm doing is I'm just playing the lowest key and I'm just droning this sound out. I'm using the vector position to kind of get a better sound or smooth out the sound, but here's what it sounds like. It's actually quite a bell sound. That's what it sounds like, but if I hold it down at the lowest octave range, I get this low percolating survival horror type thing, right? But if I go up here, right, I can get that bell sound. This is the full patch. All 4 of the layers are in this patch. All right, next in this sound is the main component, which is the strings. So if we look at the track, Leon comes in the room, and the first thing to come in is whisper voices, that synth string, and then it mixes with octave strings. So it's like, if I show you the MIDI, you see whisper voices comes in very quietly. Octave strings comes in a big cluster chord. And I was using a film scoring technique of just watching the footage and feeling it out on the synthesizer, using my ear, and just trying to complement what's going on in the gameplay. So if we go to whisper voices, it's very static and it starts building up. where I'm hitting different intervals to bring out that horror element. And if I blend it with the octave strings, you get it's like a discordant wall of like horror when you see the creature start doing its thing. So it all blends together, and then when the track opens up, when the player can play, when gameplay is happening, that's when this big mechanical rhythm comes in. Part of the sound is all of this right here. These samples are from Apple Loops, directly in Logic. So I've incorporated them in there to add swishes, like adding this other element on top within analog digital type synthesizer, right? Really adds a lot more dimension and character and impact as well. So if I take those all out, it's already a very big sound. The rhythmic sound, this sample, is either from a 90s sample pack or it is something from Silent Hill. I don't know what it is. I don't even remember where it came from at all. I made this just this previous August, so just a few months ago, and I just remixed it, actually. I remixed it from the ground up. I made a video, it was like an hour and a half long, of me regain staging it and mixing it. And I'm not doing that much to it. I've only used EQ and volume and panning, essentially, and a limiter on the main out. So I'm relying on the strong audio I recorded and the strength of all these signals. Here's the strongest sound in the arrangement. It's a very strong, saturated, heavy, mechanical, rhythmic sound that I've got both of them looped into each other. That's why there's two tracks, and they're both being sent to an RX8 D-click, and I'm just taking out some clickiness in there. It is adding a lot of like saturated like quality as well to the whole track. So all this does blend together to create this very loud track. Very loud and powerful track, and I'm just using volume, panning, and EQ. If we look at my mixer here, I'm just using volume on the faders, panning, EQing, and I'm not even really using the gain plugins I put on them. I thought I was going to do that, but I didn't. The Wavestation elements are being sent to a ozone imager to just bring them up in the mix a bit. Certain parts of them are brought up. And the rhythmic heavy element is just going to an EQ and a declicker. And then all of it is being summed up into a pre-master, which is just Ozone 9 elements. And I put it on there to actually check my track and see if I could rebalance anything. And I ended up leaving it on because the threshold was only at minus 2.3. So it was just boosting it a little bit. And I liked what it was doing, so I left it on. Also, the EQ, I left it in stereo mode. Usually I experiment with mid-side or left-right, but it's adding some high-end and it's taking out some of the mid-low. And it's actually giving me a bit more of low-end because I took out a lot in the synths. That's it. And then I have a limiter on. That's it. And I barely even touched the limiter. So if we're looking at the integrated loudness of all this, so I'm sitting around minus 14, and it's peaking at like minus 1, minus 2. So the way I achieved that was just by recording good audio from the synthesizer and balancing it all out appropriately. And I did do a lot of clever EQing in these Wavestation elements to make them fit together because of the nature of what I did, all these cluster chords, right? So yeah, that's how this track came together. the main project, if I'm talking about the project mind here, what was the intent is I played Resident Evil 2 1998 in emulator without the in-game music on. I had the in-game music off and the effects on only, and I played all the way to this point in the game, and I just played like I normally would. And I took this footage and I scored this in a very film scoring manner, where I just had you go open the door, you go into the room, the linear scene starts, then the boss battle plays out, I beat the boss, and then I put all the chess piece plugs into the door and I go through the door. And that's how I scored this and came up with this theme. So it is made in a very linear manner, but I also I designed it so when you get player control and this rhythmic element starts, I could make a loopable track if I chose to. So I scored a linear scene in the game, and I made a loopable type track within this scene, and I have it resolving to itself. So bringing the track up in intensity, because it's just so it's like an element of horror. Like, you bring down the boss, right? If I put the effects in there, you bring them down, and then there's all these creatures jumping all over you, and you just see, when you go into change the camera angle, you see the creature like bleeding out on the ground and twitching. So it's like this horror element I wanted to include. So when I'll play with effects. Then I have the music coming down after the intensity, like I have it fading out, and my environment fades back in. It's just no music. Then it's just no music. Like, everything's done, and now you can make a decision, or you can kind of reflect on what happened. So I have the track fading out. So if I wanted to make this loopable, I could rehaul it, make it loopable. But also, if I was working on an indie game and I did this, I would show the developer, and then we would break it down into individual tracks designed for a simple linear type game audio engine where only one track can happen at any one time, instead of a dynamic, more complex engine where the player's choices turn off on and off switches in this dynamic engine that is layered. All this is layered, right? Because it's technically layered, right? But for an indie game working on a budget that has a simpler engine, I'm going to simulate dynamic type music in a linear fashion. And these are some of the tricks I learned on Creatures of War, which I did that for. So I hope this has helped. I hope this video has given you some insight into my process here and how you can do something yourself. You can use synthesizers, you can think project-minded, you can use video game footage with effects and context to practice composing and become more project-minded and more dynamically minded as well with our music and ideas, because I got inspired by this boss battle and I wanted to make something with this synthesizer. So leave your comments down below if you have any questions, or you would like to see a deeper dive into how I mixed this, or like how I actually played this stuff. I want to make a simple, focused video, but I also want to provide insight into what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, and the choices I'm making when composing, recording, and mixing this, right? So let me know down below, and I would love to connect with you there, and I can even put up a longer video of the deep dive I did do. So thanks for watching. Hope you found it useful. I'll see you in the next video.